Welcome to A Veteran's Voice. I am Noga Kessler, Veterans Voices Correspondent, and today we have with us retired Air Force officer Dr. Noel Lipana. Dr. Lipana served in various Air Force, Army, and joint assignments from 1996 to 2016. During his 20-year military career, Dr. Lipana served in numerous military units, both active duty and National Guard. His service includes volunteering to serve as a counter-IED officer for Army Airborne Infantry units, conducting counter-insurgency operations in southern Afghanistan from 2007 to 2008, as well as participating in multiple civil support operations in both California and Louisiana. Dr. Lipana earned his Bachelor's of Science and commission from the U.S. Air Force Academy in 1996, graduated with a master's from the Naval Postgraduate School's Center for Homeland Defense and Security in 2011, was medically retired from the military as a lieutenant colonel in 2016, and received his Doctor of Social Work from the University of Southern California in 2018. Dr. Lipana is a recipient of a Bronze Star from the Army and a Combat Action Medal from the Air Force. Welcome, Dr. Lipana.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So why don't we start with what brought you to the military? What brought you to join the military?
I come from a family of immigrants. My father immigrated here from the Philippines, and my mom is literally a coal miner's daughter, so I'm probably the only Filipino Polak you're going to meet today. And they both instilled in my siblings a strong sense of community service and service to the nation, having come from these pretty destitute backgrounds, and the reasons that they came for California or came to America and then ended up in California were really about serving. And so my siblings all served in different capacities, not in the military but in their own professions.
Yeah. So how did you find yourself to the Air Force?
Personal grudge. It took me 3 times to get into the Air Force Academy. I was qualified and nominated each year that I applied, but I was not competitive enough for my congressional district. So I went back to school, reapplied, received a nomination from my congressman, was qualified, didn't stack up against the other people in my district, so went back to school, just kept repeating that process till they finally, I think, felt sorry for me. And I wouldn't go away.
So you developed that determination even from the get-go.
Yeah. I interned at my congressman's office one of the last years that I applied, and they knew I would get that the Air Force Academy, since I was on a scholarship to New Mexico Military Institute, was holding an appointment for me at Air Force, so they gave me the primary nomination to West Point, and they ranked me second on purpose for the Air Force Academy, so I had my choice. So that's how I ended up in the Air Force.
Maybe you could share a little bit about your experience in the military. I know it was quite extensive. It's 20 years, so it's a lot.
Yeah. In a way you feel selfish because you take away these incredible relationships. The people, first and foremost, are still a huge part of my life and the biggest asset that this nation has, and to serve alongside other men and women who just come from these really disparate backgrounds, and seeing how talented and motivated they are to contribute, I think is the biggest thing for me, that I think people outside the military kind of hear about, but until you experience it and you're part of that family, you really get a grasp for it. So that's the first thing that comes to mind when people ask me about my service or my fellow service members.
Absolutely. And you were able to within the Army, within the Air Force, a little bit within the Navy, you were able to really kind of move around in the military and, as you said, meet lots of folks.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so maybe you could share a little bit about, after those 20 years, we always talk about those core values we develop in the military through our training and the code of conduct and those things like that. What are some of the things that stand out for you that really helped you in the transition? And we know the transition for all of us outside of the military it's not always easy.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Several discipline, obviously. You know, I have a lot of grit, but that's a double-edged sword, right? So one of my mentors and colleagues, Dr. Joy Verplank, says, you know, grit is what allows you to finish the race, but it doesn't get you ready for the next race. So you can get you to the finish line, but so you have to go to some of these other, you know, tools and experiences that you know, kind of were imbued in you in the military, like that sense of purpose and mission. And I think that's where transition was difficult for me, and I think it is for a lot of other veterans, in finding that new identity, because during my work study and doctoral work, learned from my colleagues and the circles that I was in the veteran community, that the veteran transition process for individuals who are still too tightly tied to that military identity have a more difficult time going into, you know, the civilian world. And not that you have to completely shed that identity or lose those, like, you know, to your point, core values and attributes that you've gained in the military, but they just have to be transformed and kind of recalibrated a bit. So I think, you know, I certainly struggled with that identity, like what's next for me, how, you know, what is that purpose or, you know, that mission. Once you find that, you know, that why, then everything else falls in place and you can go at it in a very systematic way, just like you achieve things in the military. And then that sense of team, you know, that you've transitioned from one team in the military to achieve objectives or goals or whatever in the military, to now doing one personally. And it's like, how do you structure that family network, community network, professional and social network around you to help achieve that? Because none of the things, that stuff you read before on the teleprompter is done by me alone, right? So I'm just happen to be like a small, you know, look inside of what that concerted effort, you know, produces.
You're a leader. It's a lot of what, you know, what I shared in the beginning indicates a leader.
Rabble rousers, another good word.
But you continue to lead. And there's so much that you do to help others from your experiences. And, you know, I don't even know where to begin, but I'd like to begin with let's just begin with some of the work that you do here in California to perhaps provide support and assistance for those veterans transitioning that are struggling.
I'll answer that in a slightly different way. Absolutely. And jump over the border to Nevada and point to the David J. Dracula Chart Foundation, which was named after my battle buddy. Got his name tattooed on my arm here, along with several others. David was an artist. I'm going to take a minute to talk and brag about him, because people listening should know, you know, about him. And he was just very emblematic of the type of soldier, the type of person that we want representing us overseas in those conflicts. And we unfortunately lost him. His mom, Tina, is an artist and art educator, and decided to continue his legacy for freedom of expression through an art foundation. And so we offer art programming, initially set out for the veteran and the military communities and connected families, and now have, you know, looked at the broader, you know, service that we can provide and legacy that we want to move forward, using art as a healing tool for community writ large. So our, you know, new mantra used to be, you know, art heals war wounds, and now it's service through art. And I think it's very important. It's a great tool to bring people into a creative space and lead them by modeling, having something that you can co-create, even if you're not an artist. That's why our programming is oftentimes like just very labor intensive. We do combat paper making and other forms of art like that. And it really is just an environment that you can provide people to have discourse about tough issues that otherwise I think come, you know, these comments flying across each other and missing each other's arguments in social media and things like that. But it's very hard to other somebody when you're sitting down co-creating something with them. So that's an aspect of leadership I'm particularly, proud of and very privileged to be a part of. My full-time job, I do macro or community level social work to prevent targeted violence and terrorism in the Center for Prevention Programs and Partnerships at Homeland Security. And so what that means is we take existing community resources and try to provide education, technical assistance, and money to prevent what we look at as one bad outcome of larger systemic issues, adverse child experiences, racism, bad policies and laws that have been propagated for decades, right? And this targeted violence, attacks against houses of worship, other religious beliefs, extremism, mobilization of violence, all bad outcomes of these types of things, addiction, homelessness. They can be other outcomes, but we happen to have our focus on preventing those other violent acts. So that's what I do full time, and then I think my two other major endeavors are working for Jake Rademacher and Metanoia Films, which is funded by the Gary Sinise Foundation. And we use Jake's film Brothers at War and Brothers After War as pre and post deployment media primers to facilitate large group discussions for military members and their families on that transition. And then recently started working with a gentleman named Wanye Leonard in the city of Auburn, he's the executive director for the Central Coordinating Agency for Auburn. And we're starting to take these tools that we use for military and veteran families and adapt them and provide similar services for first responders.
Wow. How have you found, are you able to reach those that you are seeking to reach? Sometimes it's hard to ask for help, and sometimes there's lots of obstacles, and all of this that you provide, there's a lot of work to do, right? And sometimes in the rural areas or in isolated communities, it's hard to reach them.
Yeah. So, I'm, how do I say it? I'm the, I guess, go against a lot of what the, outreach efforts are. I think largely, we say we're going to, like the VA spends millions of dollars, and as do veteran service organizations, looking for veterans and trying to reach and contact them. And they're successful by some metrics. Like with my art foundation, I think some of the best advice we got from some of the best advice out there came from Admiral Mullen, and when he was speaking to the Center for Innovation in Military Veteran Health Research at USC, he said the best way you can help veterans are help the ones like in your own, local community. So I would
actually let me reframe that.
Yeah.
The traditional assistance is very different than the assistance through art, through music, through plays, through fly fishing, through
culture and right.
So I guess that was really my question.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we say, okay, we're struggling, we need to go to the doctor.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But there's other ways, more holistic type. I guess
so
that was actually my question.
I'll turn it one more revolution and say, I'm the traditionalist in that me and my colleagues like Dr. Nathan Grazier and Dr. Tina Atherall at Psych Armor are the ones that want to go back to those ancient warrior rituals for reintegration. I think that Western society and medicine is very symptom reduction approach. We are averse to pain and suffering and grief and loss. We come from, I'll turn the thing again. The traditional, idea is like, okay, you came from this team-oriented where you do everything in groups and teams in the military, and then in this transition, we expect you to go out on your own, navigate the VA all these veteran service organizations and resources. And then when you do find the gold standard for mental health, it's all one-on-one. And that's, like, it just is. So, but the traditional ancient warrior ritual is through, like, if you look at the Greek method, is through play and art and experiencing that. In Native American cultures, it's the talking circles and communalizing that grief and experience. So I think that that is something that we need to get back to, and why I didn't come into the veteran space or even in the military as an artist whatsoever. Tina had that influence on me, and it's why and how I made that transition is through art.
Yeah. You know, my usual next question is, what's your next mission? But you've already so much. So is there anything in addition that you're thinking of, in addition to all the work that you do, and all the projects and things that you are committed within our community? Are there other things in the future that, and if not, that's, you know.
Well, after a good nap, for sure helping and intentionally shaping the post-war legacy for Iraq and Afghanistan veterans. Right, it can't be. I refuse to have it be one of victimhood, being suicidal, or having post-traumatic stress. Right. So I believe one of our major contributions would be in informing the moral and ethical decision making that goes along with and preceding the use of the instrument of military power in conflicts. And I think we have generations literally of servicemen and servicewomen who can inform that conversation and speak to that through programs like this, through art, and not defaulting to this war as an extension of policy by other means. And so that's an intoxicating cycle, and we have not found a way to really capture the elixir and the wisdom that comes back from our servicemen and women. And I think it's very important. It's a way, I think, that our veterans can model equity and inclusion, and the things that I think this society is sorely missing and lacking right now, as a way to continue their service afterwards. And I think a gateway to that is, through our first responders, who, we certainly don't have the corner market on these afflictions, right? Our nurses, our doctors, our trauma personnel, police, fire, medics, people in the child foster care system, all these people have, similar challenges ahead of them and deal with them on a day-to-day basis. And that's why I think it is important to pay attention to what happens to the veteran space, because it will translate out here, which is part of what is next for me. And then looking out beyond that, these marginalized populations, whether they're cultural or affinity groups, because I look at the veterans as being probably the most resourced and advocated for demographic out there. So if we don't get it right for us, then what chance do people trying to reintegrate from prison stand, or disconnected youth, or adults aging out of the child foster care system? So we have to get it right.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Lipana.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.